I've always been fascinated with reptiles my entire life. For the most part, as a child, I kept lizards. So I'd go catch like spinies and fence lizards and stuff like that. My first reptile that I went out and my parents let me buy was a leopard gecko, and I had that leopard gecko for 15 years before she died. It was the only reptile I had for quite a long time. Joined the Navy, and I got out of the Navy, and I bought this house that I'm in currently, and I realized that I could do whatever I wanted to, and it was kind of an epiphany. And I started keeping ball pythons just because I didn't know much else other than that. My brother had one, and I was like, oh, these are cool. And I just dove so much deeper into the way more cool species, and that's where I'm at today, you know. I was out of the Navy for about 3 months, and I was riding my Harley through an intersection, and a young woman ran a red light doing about 20 over the speed limit. I saw her pretty much as fast as I could see her. I saw her. I jumped off my bike because that's what you're supposed to do, but there was not enough time in the time that I saw her and when I could react. So I jumped, but it wasn't quite fast enough. So if I wouldn't have jumped, it would have probably pinned me to my bike and sucked me up underneath the vehicle. However, when I jumped, it crushed my leg just above the ankle on my right leg, and kind of bounced, and it sucked my motorcycle underneath the car and threw me across the intersection about 30 foot. I spent about a month and a half in rehabilitation. Actually got out of rehab quicker than anybody that they'd ever seen with my condition. If you ride a motorcycle, wear a helmet. It saved my face. It would have been peeled off. Spent that time doing physical rehabilitation and reading, doing like all the reading that I could do on different snake species and stuff that I wanted to get into. And so by the time I got out of rehabilitation, I hit the ground running with some species that I knew what I wanted to get into, and I was knowledgeable enough to keep that animal. And reptiles, snakes in general, were really what kind of got me through all that. It was a pretty tough time, a lot of depression, as you could imagine, and stuff like that. Losing your limb, they say, is a lot like losing a family member. It's kind of a weird thing. It's almost like part of you dies. So you'd imagine where you kind of need to obsess about something else in order to get yourself through that funk. But for me, it was this. It was my snakes and breeding and just getting involved in the hobby. I meet so many cool people, you know, and it makes my life better. It made it to where I have a sense of purpose, you know. I have a family, and that is the sense of purpose, but you need more than just obligation whenever you're living, in my opinion. You need to be stimulated and want to do something. I'm not a very patient person, but keeping snakes has brought that out in me. There's probably other aspects of my life that my wife would argue that I'm not patient still, but there are days when I can't wear my legs, so sometimes changing water tubs on the big constrictors and stuff like that has to wait a day. And or I'll have to plan accordingly and make sure that, hey, I can't do it tomorrow, so I'm gonna have to do all that stuff today so I can take a break out of my prosthetic and stuff like that. So it's required me to do a lot more planning and construct enclosures that are accessible to me whenever I don't have the ability to wear prosthesis. But I mean, one thing that I would tell anybody is that you'd be surprised what you're capable of doing whenever something is taken away from you and you still want to do that. I hopped around on one leg and built a room in my garage. It took me 3 years, but I built a climate control room in my garage so that I could keep these animals that make me happy, that make my wheels turn and keep my mind moving in a positive direction. Don't ever just say you can't do it, because you can. If I can build a room on one leg, climbing up and down ladders and install an AC unit on one leg, then people, you can do anything. I think that you can. I got into the craze of when, I think it was like the peak of when ball pythons were really going nuts. And I had, I don't remember my exact numbers at one point. I think I had like a breeding group of about 15, 16 animals, like 5 males and 10 females. And I did that for about 2 years. On that second year, I had purchased my first female Harrisline Bredli from Nick Mutton, and bought the complete carpet python with that female, I think. I'm pretty sure that's what I did. I kept her for a year just to make sure that I could transition. And so I was growing her up, and I realized, oh, there's some cooler snakes out there than ball pythons. I kind of got burnt out on it just because it felt like you were just in a rat race trying to push the next new thing. And I've since changed pretty much my whole outlook on breeding these animals. I like the slow game. I really enjoy the generational breeding and breeding for specific traits, and I feel like that's how you get noticed in the hobby a little bit more, because you take the time. It's not just, oh, I'm gonna put this here and see what happens. You're taking the time to think out the process and turn it into what you want, because really you can do anything with these as long as you have patience. You can make anything pop. You just have to imagine it. I produced my first clutch of Morelia Bredli in 2016. I did artificial incubation. She laid 23 eggs. 2 of them were slugs, and I lost 1 during incubation on that first clutch. I was so stoked. The big reason I was really excited was that if you know anything about Bredli, males do not typically breed until they're about 4 years old. Well, I got my male to breed at 2.5 years old. I don't really know of anybody that's done it besides myself, and I think Ralph Polinsky, I think he's done it. But it's very few people can get a male Bredli to procreate that young. So I felt it was kind of like, you know, I felt I was a little bit of a stroke my ego. I guess the formula for producing Bredli is it's different than anything else, because they can handle, I mean, I get mine down in the low 50s drop, and other than inlands and maybe Brisbanes, you don't do that, and diamonds as well. You don't do that to any python. You'll die. That first season I said, you know, I'm just gonna push it to the limit, and I took them, put them in my upstairs bathroom. I opened the window, and down here in Texas, it doesn't get too cold. You can get a room into the 50s if you're lucky with the window open. And then I produced again with that same female and same male Bredli in 2017, and I let the female maternally incubate, and she did a fantastic job. I think I got 25 eggs, 3 slugs that clutch, and then I lost 1 egg during incubation, and then one of them was a fully formed baby that I think it drowned in the egg. It still had its egg tooth. I'm not entirely sure what happened with that, but it was, I mean, I count that as a success. And I actually had twins in that clutch as well. My main thing that I have to really focus on with Ragebeard Reptiles is reining myself in a little bit sometimes, because I get that, oh, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool, and you want to get into so much stuff, but bringing it back in and being like, okay, I've already got some really cool stuff, and just focusing on the stuff that I have is my main goal for this next couple years. Then I've got some odds and ends here and there. I've got a bull snake that I rescued from my work that cat had gotten a hold of and ripped the end of its tail off, and it had a huge scar down its back, and I nursed it back to health, and it stays in my collection. I've got a couple pets, that's one of them, and then I've got a dumerils boa that I don't have a male for, and she's just kind of, she hangs out, and I've had her since she was a tiny neonate, and she's just fun to have, you know. Papuans, I love them. They're fantastic. I just got my hands on a captive born and bred male for my wild caught female, and I couldn't be happier. It's hard not to fill my whole room with them. Papuan pythons, I'm no expert. I'm still learning. I think the average is about 12 to 14 foot for an adult. There's some on the higher end that you hear people talk about 16 feet. I don't know how true that is. I mean, I think that it could probably happen, but you know, it was the Morelia Python radio show with Bill Hughes. He was talking about how a lot of these countries are not going to be open forever, just exporting these animals, and it's our duty as hobbyists and enthusiasts to just save a little bit of space in your room. Well, in my case, it was a lot of space because I had Papuans, but have a project with something that maybe is not super popular, but doesn't get imported all the time, and it's from a place that may shut down. You know, Madagascar shut down. I'm pretty sure it shut down. It may have reopened, but for a long time, since the 70s, it was shut down. And so what we've had here as far as dumerils boas and ground boas, that's it. That's what we've had. It's been shut. So if that happens to Indonesia or Papua, you're not gonna get any of these animals, and they're gonna die in the hobby. So it's our duty to make sure that that doesn't happen, and save a little space in your room and breed something that maybe you don't 100% love it, but you're helping the hobby out. You're keeping that stuff in the hobby for someone that will and does love it. It's really a privilege to work with things like Papuan pythons and inlands. 10 years ago, you probably couldn't even get an inland, and we should be happy about the stuff that we do have. I see people at shows like bringing kids to shows, and I think that's important. I bring my daughters to shows all the time, and they love it. And my daughters are so desensitized to animals because we have a farm here, essentially. My daughters will be talking to people like their granddad, and he's like, ugh, and he's got that only good snake is a dead snake attitude. And my daughters will respond in a way that's like, there's nothing wrong with snakes. Why? You just need to understand them. Well, did you know this? And they teach their grandfather how things work with snakes because they've learned it from me. And I don't necessarily want my kids to do exactly what I'm doing, but just having the knowledge to not be scared is important. If that's the least that someone can get out of it, is that these animals are not a scary thing, and that they are something to be respected, and they have a place on this planet. They have a place not to be chopped in half with a hoe. You take one thing out of the ecosystem and it affects everything. You know, they have a job to do. And when you're ignorant to what it is that they do, you could affect your farm. There's so many things that can happen whenever you're like, oh, the only good snake's a dead snake. That attitude just doesn't make any sense.